The US Supreme Court is hearing arguments in cases that could have a big influence on the 2024 election. For the first time, judges will rule whether content moderation is constitutional. The court will decide whether to uphold Republican-backed laws in Florida and Texas that regulate how social media companies moderate speech. The two states passed the laws after Twitter, Facebook and others banned former President Donald Trump from their platforms in the wake of the storming of the US Capitol on the 6th of January. Supporters of the law say they protect conservatives from liberal online bias. In effect, the judges will rule on how the First Amendment applies to the internet era. Do tech giants like Facebook, X and TikTok have the right to control what users post and what others can see? If judges decide no, it's feared their ruling could amplify some of the ugliest aspects of the internet, such as hate speech and disinformation. A decision is expected in June. Well, Lindsay Gorman is a senior fellow for emerging technologies at the German Marshall Fund's Alliance for Securing Democracy. She's recently served as a senior advisor in the Biden White House at the Office of Science Technology and on the National Security Council. Welcome to the day. For non-Americans, it seems rather odd that the Supreme Court should have to rule on whether a private company can refuse to provide its goods or services to someone who breaks its rules about hateful or objectionable content. What's going on?
Well, it is a bit odd, and this debate is a true sort of question about the First Amendment. The pieces of legislation at issue are arguing that individuals' First Amendment rights are being censored and controlled, whereas on the other hand, the platforms themselves have made the argument that it is in fact their First Amendment right, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, to decide not only which kind of content and which users are allowed on the platform in accordance with certain rules and conditions, but also which content gets promoted, which content gets suppressed. These platforms, in order to exist, rely on doing content moderation to filter out some of, as you mentioned, the uglier content on the internet, hate speech and the like. And their business model would be highly threatened if they're not able to show viewers and users what they want to see without seeing some of the more hateful content out there.
OK, so this is a big deal. This is not just about some bit of Texas and Florida legislation. Whichever way this goes, this is going to have a big impact.
Absolutely. Absolutely. These platforms are successful because they're able to show us what we want. The engagement model, the engagement business model that social media platforms have really pioneered that gives them revenue from advertisements is based on giving us the content that we want to see. If they're no longer able to do that because, for example, they have to weight all content equally, they could be far less compelling product to all of us.
And if the Supreme Court rules in favour of the Texas and Florida legislation, will that mean social media companies will have to lift all restrictions on what's posted?
Well, I do think it depends what the ruling looks like, and we could see the Supreme Court opinions take up pieces of the legislation. They could go as far as to say individuals can't be banned, but perhaps certain content could be selected. There are also differences between the Florida and the Texas bills on who can be banned and what extent. So we could see potential half measures coming out of the court's ruling in June. But either way, these laws have an enormous impact on the platforms. And really this fundamental question of, are they publishers or are they public utilities, that has been a feature of the internet in the United States since its creation.
OK. Zooming out from this particular case, one wonders when the laws in Florida and Texas were passed, at that time, the world was worried about misleading posts. You have warned that a new kind of disinformation could take over the 2024 presidential election campaign, AI or generated audio and visual content. So what will an election in the era of AI look like?
Absolutely. And I think we're already seeing it. We just a couple weeks ago had an instance in the US of an AI-generated robocall that was discouraging voters from voting in the primary election. We could see a spate of AI-generated visual content, videos and audio. And we're already seeing this happen in elections throughout the world. So it's very much not a hypothetical risk that the disinformation and misinformation that already plagues the online sphere will be supercharged because it's going now into the audio, into the visual realm, not just the textual disinformation that we've unfortunately become accustomed to seeing. So huge impacts politically, even as candidates start to experiment themselves with using AI-generated content to reach constituents. And there are real questions, including around this hearing, about whether platforms will be able to selectively promote or demote that kind of content. If something they've decided is fake, will they be allowed to get that off their platform or label it accordingly? I think is all at issue here, which is particularly relevant given the advances in AI.
But it's interesting, though, isn't it? We're here talking about the threat from AI. This enormous AI meteor is hurtling towards us. Yet I think it's only Europe so far, in terms of significant jurisdictions, that seems to be doing much to try and legislate and control this technology.
That's right. Europe has definitely taken a more pro-regulatory stance than we've seen from the United States or even the UK. The approach that the United States seems to be taking is more innovation forward, trying to build in our values into the technologies themselves. But that said, I would not totally discount regulatory action. We've seen executive actions from the White House, from the Commerce Department around AI safety. So there is movement there, but Europe, much like with data security and data privacy, Europe has been first out of the gate to regulate AI. I think one of the challenges has been, though, that with the advances in generative AI, what we need to regulate, what we need to govern is constantly changing. And so it's tough for policymakers to keep up with that pace.
Doubtless we will talk about this again. For now, though, thank you so much. Lindsay Gorman from the German Marshall Fund's Alliance for Securing Democracy.
Thanks so much.